How's it going, everyone? My name is Derek Afasi. I'm the owner of Afasi Financial Group and retiresharp.com. Today's topic I want to discuss with you what is a 401a plan and go over some of the different pros and cons if you're just maybe starting off your working career or you've been working for a specific entity for a bunch of years now and you're looking how to properly maximize the growth in this type of plan and then also safely take distributions and try to create an ultimate goal for a successful retirement. Those are some of the topics I wanted to cover during this video. So a 401a plan, it's very, very similar to a 401k plan, except for very slight modifications. So ultimately what's happening is an individual is working for a specific entity. In this case, to qualify as a 401a, it has to be possibly like a government institution. It could be a school, like a nonprofit organization. There's a couple of other criteria. What I want you guys to think of is kind of think of this 401a as a type of bucket. So when an individual is working for that specific entity, they are getting paid some sort of salary or some sort of income each and every year. So as the company is paying them that income to the individual, this individual now has options that they could go and contribute into a type of retirement plan. So this is qualified through the IRS as a qualified employer-sponsored retirement plan, meaning that you have certain stipulations. You can't pull this money out before 59 and a half. If you're trying to do rollovers, you have to wait until either a new employer plan takes over or you sever employment, you're going to another entity, you hit your 59 and a half age to basically retire and do an in-service withdrawal and in-service rollover. So there's a couple of different things regarding this bucket, but the ultimate premise of this is this individual is getting paid a salary. They could take either a set portion of dollars each and every month into there, or they could go and take a percentage of that salary, place it into this type of bucket, and try to grow this bucket more and more. So one of the key facts about a 401a plan is the control that that employer has over those individual plans, meaning like if they really like a specific employee, rather than a 401k that is non-biased, meaning that essentially everybody has to have the same sort of match, everybody has to have the same sort of vesting schedule. They could actually cherry pick specific individuals with these types of plans. It doesn't really make that large of a difference, but they could essentially incentivize somebody from staying at this company larger if, let's say, they have one individual that is putting 10% of their salary and they're giving that person like a 5% match, as opposed to another individual that's putting 10% and they're only giving a 3% match. Well, obviously, the larger the match, the more beneficial that is for that individual situation that has that 401a plan. So some of the other components are like like with the 401k, they could give you options. They could give that that employee options to either contribute into it or not contribute. With a 401a, they might make it mandatory to contribute into those types of plans. So ultimately, what's happening is this individual is taking a portion of what they're getting paid, throwing into a type of retirement bucket, and trying to grow this bucket as much as possible so that you have more dollars by that time you're ready to retire, to therefore take distributions and utilize that a couple of different ways. So the first benefit is definitely the match. If you have a 401a plan and there's a specific match involved, well, it typically makes the most sense to place in whatever that match is. So if someone's getting paid $100,000 and they have a 3% match from their employer and they throw $3,000 into this plan, well, then the employer's throwing another $3,000. It's matching, so that means for that year, $6,000 went into that, was a contribution into that type of plan. If, let's say, this person has a 3% match, they throw $10,000 into this plan, 10%, well, the match is still only 3%. So that's why a lot of individuals, they overfund this and they get caught up with the verbiage of saying, oh, 100% match, and that's not typically the case. What happens is you have 100% up to a specific percentage amount, or it might be like 50% up to 6%, to say if you go and you put in $6,000 in that example, 6%, they're going to match you 50% of whatever that is, so that'll be 3% or $3,000. So there's a whole slew of different things, but understand that match is ultimately free monies that the employer is trying to incentivize the individual from jumping ship and going to a different company. They're saying, if you stay consistent with this plan, we're not only going to pay you your salary, but then on top of it, we're going to give you some free money towards your retirement and try to invest that based upon our platform of options. So if we understand that essentially that bucket idea is your dollars are going in there, the employer might be giving you a match, those dollars are going in there. Well, that's obviously going to grow that bucket. But there's a caveat to that concept is the percentage rate that's also going to come back that's tied to that bucket. And what I mean by that is with these 401as, very similar to 401k plans, is you might have a whole slew of mutual fund related options or stocks, bonds, ETFs, mutual funds that you could choose to essentially grow this account further. But that comes at a risk, it comes at a cost. So with these 401a plans, you have a specific cost involving what those funds are. And then on top of it, the most important cost, I believe, is downward market loss, or the most important risk is obviously downward market loss potential. And this was very apparent in 2008 when you had individuals that lost, some individuals lost 30% of their portfolios, other individuals lost 60% of their portfolios. So in theory, if someone was going and they kept placing more and more dollars into this, they were getting the match. It didn't really matter how much that they were placing in, how much was matching. Yes, that was growing the bucket. And this additional interest credit, if let's say that mutual fund performance or the stocks, bonds, ETF performance it was positive for that year, well, then yes, they're going to essentially double compound that growth into this bucket. So it would be the dollars that they're placing in there, the dollars that are being matched, and then if this came back positive, well, then that's ultimately going to have a much larger bucket. But if let's say they were placing those contributions, they experienced a type of 2008, a market reset, and they lost 50% of their portfolio. Let's say if they go and they put in, 300,000 total throughout all those years, it grew up to 500,000, and then they hit a 2008, and it cut their, their portfolio in half. It cut their account in half because this had a minus 50% loss. Well, now they'd be walking into that next year at $250,000. It did not matter how much they placed in there. Obviously, that's going to help because if you don't put anything into that plan, then obviously you're not going to have anything in that plan. But it's very crucial to really understand this component of that interest credit, and there's ways on how you could do that very effectively, very efficiently. And at the end of the day, what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to make this bucket larger. We're trying to have a larger bucket so that by the time you want to retire, well, obviously it makes more sense. If you have $600,000 in this bucket, you could do more things with that money than as opposed to having $100,000 in that bucket. So you could splice that up a whole portion of different ways. So that's ultimately when individuals have this 401a account. It's very similar. They might have like a 401a, they might have a 401a and a 403b, a 401a and a 401k, depending upon their situation, depending upon their employer. I've seen it where an individual is like working for a hospital and one wing is a private sector and the other wing is a public sector. So they might be offered both a 401a and a 401k or 403b and a 401k. So it really just depends. But ultimately understand that the money that's being placed into these buckets, they are known as pre-tax. So they're growing into this account tax deferred. The interest credit that's being credited into that account, that's growing tax deferred. But when they're looking to pull out distributions from that account, like after they hit age 60 and they're in their retirement years, all those monies are going to be fully taxable because they haven't paid monies on those. They haven't paid taxes on those monies yet. So the number one problem that individuals make with these 401a accounts is they just set it and forget it. I always ask, I said, what was the mechanism? What was the strategy on how you chose your 401a options, regarding your specific employer-sponsored retirement plan? They said, I just kind of looked at, past performance, and I just kind of took a guess. And that's not going to be enough because those individuals in 2008, they all took a guess and they all thought that they saw this growth from 1980 through 2000 of the market, thinking that the market's always going to be going up, and they've unfortunately were planning on retiring within a couple of years, and everything got pulled back because the market is nothing more than a stock market, than a casino, than a market gamble. And there's ways on how you could choose those funding options most effectively, most efficiently. If an individual, let's say that they have an old 401a and just kind of still sitting with that previous employer and they switch over to a new employer, well, then you have a whole slew of options that you could roll over this 401a into a specifically designed IRA account that has a very similar growth potential. The problem with the 401A is you have limited funding options. So that percentage rate, what that's linked to, like those mutual funds, ETFs, stocks, bonds that I was talking about, well, you might have anywhere between 5 to 20 different options to choose from with the 401A. If you go and you do a rollover, so you could only choose that many eggs in your basket, that many, and hopefully there's enough good eggs to to choose from to make it very effective to have a good effective growth on that. If you go and you do a rollover into an IRA account, well, you might have 3,000 different eggs to choose from. You could splice it up specifically to your exact age, what you're trying to accomplish on a growth, on a conservative rate. There's a whole slew of different things. So understand if you sever employment and you have those old accounts sitting there, there's ways of how you can effectively roll over those monies into specifically designed IRA contracts that either work very similar regarding, uncapped growth, uncapped loss potential, or you could have ones that give you more of that consistency, something more along the fixed, or you could utilize indexing strategies, a different thing of options. Now, another option that's very favorable is when an individual hits age 59 and a half, usually they're able to utilize this 401A monies, even though they're still working for the company, and they're able to do something known as an in-service rollover, an in-service withdrawal, and you could set that up into a whole portion or a whole myriad of options that will pertain to your exact retirement goal. And what I mean by that, let's say if you have a 401A retirement account, it's sitting at like $500,000 and you're currently age 60 and you understand that you want to retire at age 65 and say, okay, at 65, I want to, trigger Social Security income. I just basically want to call it quits. I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to kind of ride off into the sunset. Well, with those sorts of plans, it's known as a retirement income strategy, and what we typically recommend, and it goes more specific than this, but the generalized version of this is to say that, okay, what are your income sources at that age 65? What are your emergency funds at that age 65? What is your inflationary protection at that age 65? So let's say this individual that's age 60, and let's say that they need $50,000 of income for the rest of their life at age 65, meaning that these are their expenses. And when we utilize different budget analysis, we understand that they need, for really easy math, $50,000 each and every year from age 65 to the rest of their life. So if they're not offered a type of pension plan and they said, well, I just have my Social Security income, well, that's going to be a set income stream that they can never outlive. So maybe their Social Security income comes in about $35,000 at that age 65, is just this hypothetical example, and they have this $500,000 of this 401A account that's sitting there. Well, rather than roll the dice and do what individuals did in 2008 to say, oh, I'm so close, I'm 5 years away, I'll just stay consistent with how I'm setting up my growth strategy, I always recommend, or I give them the options to say, hey, this is some food for thought. Why don't you look towards securing that a little bit better, and you set up something on a more scientific approach, a more mathematical analysis to say, what's the smallest amount of dollars out of this 500,000 that we could roll over into IRA 1 and possibly put it with like an insurance company, one of their annuity product lines, ones that give you control, ones that you're not surrendering, not annuitization, but like a hybrid type annuity IRA that will provide you that $15,000. So maybe at this time frame at their age 60, it's going to cost them $200,000 to place into an account that will be deferred for 5 years and then trigger lifetime income to them for exactly that $15,000 gap. To equate, the $35,000 plus the $15,000 would equal that $50,000 goal. So with that, we still have $300,000 remaining. Rule of thumb is you want to keep about 6 to 12 months of emergency funds. So let's say another $50,000. They roll over a portion of that into an IRA money market account. So that's really liquid cash, something that they're not looking to have growth, but they're not looking to have losses on. If an emergency, if a health situation occurs, if some sort of emergency occurs, if I always call it oh my gosh moment occurs, they could pull from those money successfully. So then that's going to require $50,000. So you use $200 on the IRA annuity, you used $50,000 in the money market account, and now you have $250,000 that you could do a whole plethora of options. You could set up little annuity laddering strategies to say, okay, at age 65, I might need $50,000 of income, but maybe at age 68, I might need $52,000. Because these expenses, a portion of them are going to be fixed, a portion of them are going to be inflationary. So you could set up these micro annuity contracts, these micro laddering strategies to provide you more and more incomes every few years to just essentially step up. Or you could say, at this point in time, I'm eligible to place into specifically designed IRA contracts. Why don't I just go through that same growth strategy, but make sure I'm utilizing the highest quality funds at the cheapest possible cost, much cheaper than what the 401a, or a lot more plentiful options than the 401a, 5 to 20 different options. So it just gives you better eggs to choose from. And this is, when we're setting up this generic 3-tier of safety, what does that do? It gives you peace of mind rather than roll the dice and say, oh, I'll worry about it when I get to age 65. It says, no, I'm going to set up an actual plan. I'm eligible because I hit my age 59 and a half. My employer, it really just depends upon the 401a employer and how that entire process works. But typically, they allow you to take either a portion of this or all of this and splice it up properly. So also for those next 5 years, you could still be making contributions. Yes, your account value would be sitting at zero, so you'd be basically making new contributions into that 401a plan, but you splice this 500,000 rather than go into one sort of niche, one sort of income plan or one sort of, emergency plan. You're splicing them out correctly. You could do multiple. You could do 3, 4, 5, 10 different types of IRA contracts that are all serving a purpose, all by utilizing those monies, and you were preparing before you actually hit that retirement age. So it's all about preparation, all about looking at the 30,000-foot view, saying, where am I right now? How can I get there successfully? And this is where we come in, is we try to educate you guys the most effective way. There's sometimes that what the individual is doing, we don't make any recommendations. We say, it would be a disservice to change anything because you're essentially going to be shooting yourself in the foot if you do so. So it's all about, each individual is going to be different. It's different than sitting at a seminar and having 50 people in the same room and then having one advisor pitch one sort of plan. That's nonsense in my book. I just think that each individual is going to have an individual situation, and it has to be set up because there is no room for error in retirement. You make one large mistake and then you're going to be working well into your 70s. Your 80s sometimes in worst case scenarios of saying, oh my gosh, I had this money, I was right there. And we hear the stories all the time. So this is my passion, to always make these videos and do the radio and all that stuff to give you guys as much free education out there. So at any point in time you find value in this video, you want to give us a call. We're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, mornings, nights, weekends, holidays, whatever the case may be. We're rated A+ in the Better Business Bureau. We're accredited business with them. And I think it's because of the methodical process. We've always had very good reviews. We've never had any complaints. It's because we try to educate you guys first, and it's more of transparency. It's not just us beating you over the head telling you, why we're so great. It's more along the lines of, what's your situation? Let's figure this out together, and we're there to give you the tools required to have a successful and most importantly a confident retirement. So I want to thank you very much for watching this video. Please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Retire Sharp, so you can have access to the most updated videos. Thanks so much, guys.